So welcome to the HFX webinar. It's really great to have you with us here today. My name is Jeremy Lovelace. I am the founding director of HFX Training. We are dedicated to providing simulation-based training solutions to business instructors. And today we're going to be discussing business simulations for online learning, and particularly how to succeed in what everyone is calling the new normal. So before we start, just to reiterate some of the housekeeping notes that I put in the chat, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And so please, at any time, just if you have any questions, put them in the chat room and we'll get to them at the end of the session. If we don't get to them in this webinar, then we'll make sure that we answer any questions that are left over after the session. There will be a recording of the webinar and we'll send that out to you in the very short future. So the presentation today won't last any more than 1 hour, so we will be finished at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So what have we seen since March? Well, there's been an unprecedented shift towards online education. So before lockdown, only 15% of students were enrolled in online programs. Now, globally, in response to Corona, almost every university has shifted to online classes. So how have we done? Well, most universities have come up with a workable solution during the lockdown. However, a recent survey by Niche, the education research company, which surveyed 80,000 students and their parents, has shown that the student experience has been a challenge. The majority of students have not been entirely happy with their online education experience. So, for example, in response to the survey question, this experience of learning online has made you more likely to consider online education in the future. Only 27 respondents said yes, and 53% said no. Meanwhile, in response to the question, online classes are as effective as in-person classes, only 15% agreed. So now, as we enter what may be an extended new normal, business educators must more than ever look for appropriate tools to engage their students and drive a learning experience that leaves them satisfied. So in this presentation, we're going to explain why we think business simulations are the perfect tool for this new environment. So before we kick off, these are the topics that we're going to be touching on today. We're going to start by defining exactly what we mean by business simulations for online learning. Then we're going to look at why simulations are ideal for online education. Then we're going to look at the key success factors for effective simulation deployment in an online environment. And finally, we'll take a look at HFX and our solutions, and we will hear from a couple of professors who have recently successfully used an HFX simulation in an online or blended format. So let's look at the definitions. What exactly do we mean by simulations and online learning? Well, first, the simulations that we're talking about today are multi-round competitive business simulations that can be used to teach and reinforce learning outcomes across many different management disciplines. Second, when we talk about online simulation delivery, we're talking about games where students can interact with the game remotely. They can do this either in a synchronous format, where students will typically, but not always, play in teams, competing directly against each other over a fixed timetable. But we're also talking about games that can be played in single player version, where students typically on their own can play and process rounds of the game themselves. So why are simulations ideal for online learning? Well, in simple terms, we believe that simulations improve both the student and the teacher experience. So starting with the student experience, there are 4 things that simulations do that help make them a great tool for online learning. First, simulations naturally flip the classroom, forcing the students to take a proactive approach to learning. Initially, some students are intimidated by a flipped classroom. However, the power of simulations to gamify the learning experience and the promise of real-time feedback makes the whole experience addictive. This goes hand in hand with the competitive aspect of simulations. Finally, the team-based learning format that is typical of business simulations has its own benefit, introducing students to the different perspectives and skill sets of their colleagues. But also, team-based learning has the additional benefit of adding another layer of accountability. So instead of students just having to be motivated internally and by their teachers, they're also getting motivated by their peers. So taking all these four factors together means that simulations have an uncanny ability to get students motivated, even when they're near the end of a long multi-year program. Anecdotally, we see this phenomenon all the time. Even with our more complex simulations, as soon as that first test round is played, students become hyper-focused and put the work in with very little encouragement needed from instructors. So what about the teaching experience? Simulations aren't just a great tool for students. We think they're fantastic for teachers as well. So first of all, simulations make for a time-efficient teaching experience. Typically, simulations offer some degree of automated scoring and even grading. But in addition, the flipped classroom helps minimize the amount of teacher talk time required. So teachers sort of shift from that sage on the stage role to the guide on the side role. Initially, this different teaching style can be an adjustment for some professors, but once they've got used to it, there's never any looking back. Second, simulations improve the student engagement and learning outcomes. So ultimately, an effectively delivered simulation has the power to improve student course and professor ratings. Finally, simulations are easily scalable. I don't know how big your typical class sizes are, but with our system, for example, we can easily deliver simulations to a multi-class cohort with typically up to 10 teams of 5 players each, or even thousands of individual students via the single player version of our games. So what are the key success factors in successful simulation delivery? We're going to look at 3 components that we think have to be there for a successful simulation delivery in an online learning environment. They are getting the right simulation, the right support, and using the right communications tools. So what do we mean by the right business simulation? Well, there are 3 things that you need to look for in a simulation. So the first thing is you need to ensure that the simulation is a fit for your discipline. There are many different simulation games out there, and some are better suited than others to particular disciplines, contexts, and student skill levels. A mismatch can lead to either unmotivated or overwhelmed students, so it's really important to get it right. Second, you need to ensure that the simulation is cloud-based. Cloud-based games mean that learners can access the game from any location. By being able to access the game interface directly in this way, all members of a team, even when geographically dispersed, get to engage with the game directly. Older games, on the other hand, are frequently hosted on a local drive, and they simply don't offer the ability for students to access the game interface remotely. Now, finally, the game should be accessible across all devices. Now, while typically the complexity of simulations means that they are generally better suited to the laptop or the larger screen of a laptop or desktop, offering multi-device access, especially to tablet or smartphone users, ultimately removes another barrier to student engagement. So the second thing that you need to look for is expert instructional support. as simulation games are complex, they're only really accessible when they're delivered with expert pedagogical support. And this is really the second key component to successful online simulation delivery. As a teacher, you need to be looking for, first of all, high quality digital courseware that comes with a simulation. Such courseware should include teaching videos, exercises, case studies, and worksheets. The courseware should not just help teach the game, but also help you as an instructor by reinforcing key learning goals of your curriculum. Second, the simulation should come with a remote help desk that can help you, the instructor, support you with your teaching needs. Optionally, such a help desk should be able to act as a teacher assistant and interact directly with the students. Third, the simulation provider should have a smooth, asynchronous instructor training process, allowing professors to familiarize themselves with the simulation in their own time. And finally, for program administrators, a simulation provider should be able to offer live instructors from its own pool of qualified instructors. These instructors may be from the simulation provider itself, or they may be third-party professors that have gone through requisite training. All in all, these four elements form the expert instructional support that is essential to driving a successful online simulation program. The final key success factor is this: effectively leveraging communications technology to ensure an engaging user experience. Well, there are three key tools. The first is the course delivery platform. So what do we mean by the course delivery platform? Well, for HFX, for example, we use our own LMS to deliver our course materials. This platform also enables us to manage like compliance quizzes and monitor student performance, and even offer coaching services to students throughout the game. The second key communications technology that you have to be fluent with, and I'm sure you already are now, you've already successfully logged into a Zoom call, but you need to be fluent with communications technology, and I think that sort of goes without saying. Finally, the final element we're talking about with communications technology is presentation technology. And we think gone are the days where you can just use PowerPoint in a bullet pointed way to deliver your training. Now we have like things like PowerPoint and all the different presentation tools out there enable you to animate and script your classes. But also there are some new tools that are designed to help recreate the classroom teaching experience online. For example, we use a technology called Prof Behind the Glass for delivery, and you will hopefully be hearing from Cam, who's this teacher here, at the end of the presentation, and he's going to talk a little bit about his experience of teaching online simulations using this particular technology. So moving on to HFX and our solutions. To give you a clear idea of what this might look like in practice, we're going to look more deeply at our solutions, and then we're going to listen to a couple of professors who've recently used our games in an online learning environment. So at HFX, we can help educators teach a wide variety of disciplines, from more generalist disciplines like strategic management and organizational behavior, through to more specific disciplines like sustainability, marketing, and healthcare, for example. We do this in partnership with specialist simulation design teams, and we currently have 7 games available from 3 different design teams. So depending on your discipline, we have a game to support your teaching needs. All of our games are cloud or application-based, with a modern interface offering multi-platform access and automated scoring, meaning that they're perfect for online teaching. They're also all delivered via our course delivery platform, which allows for easy implementation with course customization functionality and multi-platform access for teachers and students alike. The course delivery platform also serves as the framework for our expert support services. So let's take a look at these in more detail now. There are 4 components to our support services. The first is our digital courseware. This courseware is packaged in structured curricula with case studies, teaching videos, supplementary worksheets, assignments, compliance tests, and peer reviews. Second, depending on your needs, we offer tiered help desk services to instructors and students to help ensure seamless, stress-free implementation for you and a happy experience for your learners. Third, we provide tiered instructor training programs to help efficiently get instructors ready to teach our games. And finally, for administrators looking to outsource instruction entirely, we offer live instruction from one of our expert teachers using the latest presentation technology. So now let's take a look at some use cases so you can get an idea of how this might work for you. So we're going to be listening to testimonials from Professor Kimberly Reeve from Baruch University and the King's College in New York, USA. We're going to be listening to Professor Kaye Thorn from Massey University in New Zealand. We're going to listen to Professor Mistry from the University of Delaware. We're going to listen to Professor Cam Tipping, who is the designer of the SABRE series of simulations. And finally, we're going to listen to a recording of Peter Jaskiewicz from Telfer Business School in Ottowa, Canada. So starting with Kimberly. Kimberly, can you unmute your computer and just share a little bit about your experiences?
Sure. Good morning, everyone from New York City. And as Jeremy mentioned, I teach full-time at the King's College, which is a very small college, and I teach as an adjunct part-time at Baruch, which is the largest business school in the United States. So it's fun to have a foot in both worlds. And I teach a variety of courses. I teach undergrad, grad, and doctoral students. And I actually also teach a high school program in the summer through King's. And I've used this simulation, the HFX simulation, in a few of those courses. And one of the things that really drove me to look for a new solution is at Baruch, we use another simulation that shall remain nameless. And I just found that the interface was so complicated that my students weren't benefiting from the experience because they were basically just trying to, randomly throwing in numbers, trying to get it to work. And in fact, the interface was so complex that in my very first class, I had a student on week 3 come in with a note from her doctor saying, the screen of the simulation triggers my epilepsy. And so I thought, well, gosh, this is really a significant issue. So we have to find a better solution. And that's really the first thing that I love about HFX, that the interface itself is so simple that it's not off-putting when you pull it up and do a quick demo with students. There isn't this kind of collective, confusion of what on earth am I supposed to do with this? And because of that, I was able to really feel confident in implementing it, again, with everyone from high school students through graduate students. And because it has a simple interface, it makes it really easy for me as an instructor to really layer the learning. So obviously when I am teaching undergrad students, I focus more on the basics. I just got done teaching a higher level finance class, and we're able to really integrate a lot more issues. And the support materials from HFX make it really easy. One very fun thing that you can do is you can basically introduce some shocks into the system. So you can say, oops, guess what? All of your workers went on strike. And I teach a business in New York City class, and it was great to be able to customize those to some New York City specific actions that were actually happening while I was teaching the class. So it was a super easy way for me to really customize the course and make it super relevant. And that comes to my third and final point, which is, I know all of us are really committed to having our students have the best experience possible, but we also want an experience that we can actually do. I know I was the very first one to think, oh gosh, I don't have time to learn another system. I don't, how is this gonna work? I can't do it. And I have been really impressed both with just how easy the HFX system is to implement, as well as how accessible the support is. And I can't emphasize that enough. I know that we are all busy, have a lot to do. If you are like me, your technology skills are not as good as your students. And I just really feel confident, much more confident using HFX solutions than any of the other simulations that I've also used. So those are my thoughts, but again, can't speak highly. Jeremy, I think I've been piloting the simulations for 3 years now, using the simulations in different classes for over 3 years.
Super. Thanks so much, Kimberly. I really appreciate it. So now we're going to move on to Professor Sal Mistry from the University of Delaware. So Sal, please unmute your mic and take it away.
Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity. My experience is very similar to Kimberly's, but I thought maybe I would take a step back and talk a little bit about what motivated me to do it. So the 3 big reasons. The first one is I moved school. So I moved from Texas, a school in Texas, where I didn't do any simulations, to a school in Delaware, the University of Delaware. And when I arrived here, I usually give an opening survey to my students. And I did that in Texas, and I also did it here. And what I noticed, and I've been seeing this more common among the students for the last probably 4 or 5 years, and that is that students I ask them, what type of learner are you? Are you a kinesthetic learner, an auditory learner, a visual learner? And the number 1 answer is usually kinesthetic, followed by visual, and then the very last one is auditory. So that immediately told me that I needed to create a classroom environment, at least if I want to keep them engaged, where they're actually seeing and doing something. So that was one big motivation for me. The second big motivation for me is I wanted to collect research. There were a couple of ideas that I wanted to test out in student teams. And so I was able to collect data over 3 time periods. And I had about 160 students in my classes. So I was able to collect data on that, which is usually very hard to do. So those were my big motivations. So then I started looking at different types of providers. And so I teach an organizational behavior class, which is essentially a class where you try to understand the behaviors of others in organizations and then try to figure out ways to improve that behavior or attitude, especially if it's a negative behavior or a negative attitude. So when I went out and started looking for a business simulation, I couldn't find one that fit what I needed. And that was for an organizational behavior class. There were a lot of business simulations that were out there that talked about strategy, and they talked about operations management. And I had selected one, and I had to do a whole lot of work. And this was probably about 3 weeks before the semester started, and I met HFX, Jeremy and Kathleen and Kate. And so at the AOM conference last year. And when they were talking about it, they talked about something that really piqued my interest, and that was customizability. And so I said, well, I don't really have a course that's a strategy course or an operations course, but you said something about customizability, so let's have a follow-up phone call. And when we had a call, I had a call with Jeremy, and he really tried to understand what I was trying to accomplish. And what I wanted the students to walk away from is that in class, I'll ask a student, for instance, what would you do in this situation? And normally students would answer the exact right answer that I wanted. But we know when we work with individuals, they don't do the answer they would provide in class. And so what I wanted to do is create an environment where they're able to use the concepts in my class and see them operate in real life, and then also, try to overcome any type of conflict or issues that they're having in classes, in the class with their student teams. So the way I approached it is each section was organized around 10 to 12 teams of students of 5 or 6 individuals, and they were essentially the top management team of the organization. And what they would do is they would make decisions like they were running the actual company. But the interesting part for me was I started seeing some of the behaviors that I would describe at the beginning of the course happen during their team. So for instance, some teams, people in teams would display withdrawal behaviors. Other ones would engage in social loafing. And so they used concepts from my class to overcome those specific issues. And that, I think, was really good. And at the very end, I asked them to come up with a paper and a presentation, a final presentation on what organizational behavior concepts they learned. And Jeremy got to read a majority of those. And I was very impressed by the thought that they put into it. And I think Jeremy was impressed by how much they got out of a strategy game that was focused on an organizational behavior course. So I'd be happy to talk to any of you in more detail if that's the angle that you're pursuing. But that's all I have to say at this point.
Great, Sal, that's fantastic. Can I just ask you, Sal, a little bit about your experience with because my understanding is that it was sort of a blended delivery. How much work were the students doing outside of class, and how useful did you find like the sort of online delivery components of the HFX solution?
Well, I thought it was good. So what I did is I had them run through it in class. So all the students, because one of the hardest things about a simulation, and I knew this when I did my MBA, is finding the time to meet with everybody and then actually make decisions as a team. So I used my class time to do that. And then I walked around and listened in on what they were going through. I saw people engage in some of the behaviors I described earlier. So the online experience, I think, was good. And I think even when a student team decided to meet like at a coffee shop, the online delivery mechanism helped them because they were able to have access to it wherever they were. And then sometimes students were sick. It was before COVID, but a lot of people had the flu, so they couldn't join in the online, the classroom environment. So they were able to kind of be a part of it without being there. So I saw both delivery mechanisms. Is that what you wanted me to say?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think yeah, it's like the although we've optimized our games for online, they're obviously equally usable in a classroom format. Yes. And realistically, I think it's a question of this. I think we can all agree that certainly for undergrad or college age students, that classroom delivery format is just more engaging and animating in general. So what we're trying to do is just provide as much of that classroom-like experience in an online format. But Sal, thanks. You spoke really, really well there. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great.
So we're now going to take a look at Peter Jaskiewicz's testimony. So Peter's just been delivering a simulation to a class in Scandinavia while he's been based in Canada. So he just gave a short testimony about that.
Hi, my name is Peter Jaskiewicz. I'm the University Research Chair in Enduring Entrepreneurship at the Telfer School of Management at the University of Ottowa in Canada. In my teaching and research, I try to find the answers to the pressing questions that the next generation has. More specifically, I'm trying to help the next generation to successfully take over, govern, and grow the businesses that their families have started in the past. Towards that goal, I very often use case studies and simulations in my undergraduate and graduate classes. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I've not only used these tools in person, but also remotely via Zoom and other video conferencing softwares. This hasn't been a problem at all. For instance, I've recently used FHX simulation, the strategy simulation, to work with a business family abroad. It has been very easy to connect with them and prepare them. And then while we are testing the simulation, the various rounds, to debrief with them and touch base with various groups. I believe it's been a great success, and that simulations lend themselves very well for online education. I look forward to using simulation more often in the future and hope that others will use it too. All the best.
So just
Thanks, Jeremy.
Yourself. That's fantastic.
Yep, I think I did that. Yep. Greetings from New Zealand, where it's very early in the morning and cold and wet, unfortunately. I used the strategy game just last semester, so starting in February, going through the semester up until July. Obviously, this was a period of great uncertainty. We started, I should say, perhaps I deal with the capstone course of the Master of Management degree here at Massey. So we're talking about students doing their final paper of their master's degree. Most of the cohort here in Albany, we've got more than one campus. Most of the students in this campus were international students. We have about 95% international at any one time. This semester, I started the year with some students offshore. So we had students who were back in China who had not been able to come into New Zealand after we locked the borders. And I had students in India, and I had students in front of me in the class. So we had a real mixture right from the start. The reason for wanting to undertake a simulation was that I felt that these students were not getting the experience that the paper was set up for. So the paper was really set up for professional practice. It was meant to be people who were working full-time, studying part-time, and they were in the workplace, identifying issues in the workplace and solving those problems. My students, most of them had never been in the workplace. They were full-time students. We had a completely different scenario. And I felt that they were really missing out on a lot of the extra information that a management student should be getting. So this was when I approached Jeremy at an Academy of Management conference a couple of years back, and I got more serious late last year, and we started talking all the time to try and understand it. It's really interesting listening to your presentation, Jeremy, and those words I heard on the first day that made me so very scared about the simulation and what I should be doing and how it was going to operate. And now having been through the system and knowing just how easy it was to work with you through that system, it shows that there is a big area of learning under your guidance that I undertook. Why did once I decided to use a simulation, I guess the question then was, why did I choose HFX? The key reason, I think, was because of the level of support that was offered. What this meant was that I didn't have to worry about the detail of the simulation. I didn't have to understand it completely, even though I really did try hard to understand it. But it meant that I was there, I was able to look after the pastoral care for the students as they were going through COVID, as some of them lost their jobs, as they were put into a situation of lockdown where they were in the house with the children as well, trying to manage the study at the same time. So I'm so glad I did go with HFX, because that extra support just enabled me to give that attention to the students and to assist them through. I think what Jeremy said about less teacher time, less talk time was a really valuable point for me. It meant, as I said, that I could focus on other things. But the students got a huge amount out of it. I was really surprised by how much they got and how dedicated they were to participating in this. Remember that we're dealing with a class of, I think there were 38 students, and I think 30 of those would have been Chinese students. So I didn't know that this would appeal to them. The rest of the students, I think, were Indian, plus a few from other countries. I didn't know how it would go with the Chinese students, but actually they really liked it. It was interesting to see their reflections on doing the simulation, the number of hours they were spending researching, trying to find out what the terms meant. Their knowledge expanded hugely. And if I look at some of the things that they commented about, things that they liked, I've got here that they liked the improved analytical skills. They liked the decision making. They found the teamwork, although it wasn't always a positive experience, it was a learning experience, and they were pleased to have that. I guess the final thing is that the students liked the simulation game and the way that it changed. There are unexpected scenarios that they have to face each week or each through the intervals, And the students really loved reacting to that and reading up about what they had to do for that, and moving ahead and making new decisions from there. So it was very successful for me. I would love to do it every semester. This semester I'm not doing it, and the only reason for that is that I was told we only had 5 students and no money. But actually it turns out we have, again, 38 students, and I feel they're missing out compared to the students last semester. So my experience was really positive, really enjoyed it, would do it again, and I'm encouraging my colleagues to do it also.
Kaye, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your testimonial there. It was a very exciting experience for us as well, because of the scenario in which we were delivering the game. And thank you for your support. So now we're going to listen to Cam Tipping, who is Cam. Just unmute your mic if you can. And Cam is going to share with us a recent experience that he had in delivering his SABRE simulation. It was to a corporate client, but in partnership with IMD Business School in Switzerland. So Cam, take it away.
Can you hear me, Jeremy?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. Okay. Well, first of all, Kaye, my daughter's living in Christchurch, so I'm glad you're enjoying New Zealand there. And I'll just share an experience. We've partnered with Jeremy and with some of our simulations, and one of our simulations, the SABRE business strategy simulation, we ran for Sanofi Pharmaceutical, which many of you know is based out of Paris. We had 40 participants, 21 countries across 22 time zones. And so normally the course would run over, an executive course runs over 8 hours a day. In this case, we ran it only 4 hours a day, so we could accommodate all the time zones. But so we did our lectures to begin with. We reviewed the simulation each day, and then went on to their decisions in the simulation. This is the first time that we did this, and we did this using a technology we're calling Prof Behind the Glass. And I'm standing behind a giant sheet of glass, and so it was just a unique way to teach the course. And I'll just put it up here, and you can go on and see us online if you wish. But it's just a wonderful way to engage people offline. What was really cool of the 40 participants, I think 37 specifically mentioned this technology for teaching, and then the simulation itself and how engaging it was. Probably most of them said they were expecting quite a boring Zoom call, and that they were going to be sort of suffering for 4 hours a day. And they all came back and just said what an engaging program it was. And first of all, the Prof Behind the Glass turned out to be a very engaging way to teach the sessions. And then the simulation really brought them together as a group. Now imagine that there's 5 teams competing directly against each other for market share and profit. And so we had what we call 2 worlds. So there's 20 participants in each world. So those 20 people are broken into 5 teams of 4, and they were competing against each other. So, we taught it this way. Was able to come on the glass here. I probably just put, I'll just show you a few things with the Prof Behind the Glass while I've got your attention. But you can pop your slides. I'll just go into a presentation mode here. But you can put your slides up on the screen, and I got to stand aside here, but you can talk right into the slide. Or if you want to get a bit more sophisticated, you can talk right into the slide with Prof Behind the Glass. So it was just a fun way to do the course. And then this combined with the simulation just made it an online experience. I'll just mention one more thing here. This was the 10th course that we've done for Sanofi around the world. And what was interesting for me is the other 9 before this were all done in person. We do 3 a year, one in Switzerland at their Lausanne campus, one in Singapore at their campus there, and then one in Boston for the Sanofi North America, South America group. So of those 9, we've got the feedback, which has always been very positive. And what was very interesting with this is the feedback was equal, at least equal to what we had in the other 9 programs. So online teaching doesn't have to be a step down. It's definitely using some of the technology that's out there and using the simulations that Jeremy is promoting here certainly changed the dynamics of class. And it really does flip the classroom around. It's, you know, one of the goals we made with the Sanofi class wasn't to make it as good as a classroom experience, but to make it better and start using technology in a positive way rather than trying to recreate a classroom. We wanted to create a better experience. And, you know, from all the feedback we got from them, this has been a much better one. So I won't go into the details of the SABRE business simulation. I'll let Jeremy take you all through that in the future, but just a fantastic way for students to learn, because they've got to put their knowledge into action. It's not memorization. This is, you can memorize how to drive a car, but you still can't drive a car. This forces you to do it. And these are the same tools that your students need when they go into the real workforce. And they can go out into their communities and make a real difference in the businesses in their communities. And that's what simulations are all about. So they can learn those tools, they can immediately apply them to their businesses and make a difference. Jeremy, I'll turn it back to you. Is there anything else you want me to talk about?
No, I thought that was fantastic, and really, and a very powerful word to say we're not just trying to be as good as Classroom, we're actually trying to leverage this online teaching tools to make it an even better experience than what students would have in the class. And that's, I mean, that's fantastic. I think I love that. The prof behind the glass looks so good, Cam. I love it.
Thanks, Jeremy.
So we are now, we've arrived at our Q&A session. So please put any questions that you have in the chat room and we will answer them. So we've got a question here from Erica. Do you have any simulations related to team building? Well, Erica, in one sense, almost every simulation that we have can be used as a team building tool, because almost all simulations are well used in an environment where each fictional company or each fictional sort of team in the game is managed by a group of students, and so it automatically engenders team-based practice or teamwork practice. On the last call, we listened to Professor Sal Mistry, who's a professor of organizational behavior at the University of Delaware. And Sal used our simulation, the strategy game, to reinforce all of the curriculum learning outcomes that he had for his organizational behavior course, and particularly reinforce optimal team behaviors. But almost any of the games can be used to reinforce team behaviors, but we have deep experience, particularly with the strategy game. We've got another question here from Charles. Charles, what industry reports are used by the students to make decisions in the round? Do you have a simulation with questions to use as a cumulative evaluation in an undergraduate program? Cam, if you've got anything to add to that in the chat room, that would be interesting to hear if you've got anything to add to that about your experience with the SABRE Sims. But I can say certainly that all our games get delivered through our course delivery platform, and we embed questions into that curriculum so we can monitor student compliance and performance in that way. I think Cam will be able to speak to this. Cam, if you're still around, I know that SABRE has a SABRE exam as well. So Cam might be able to speak directly to that.
Yeah, I'll just speak to, well, you know, first of all, in each of the round, the pedagogy of the simulation is, you can get into segmentation, into positioning, and into portfolio and conjoint analysis if you wish. Each of those sessions has a tool associated with it. So for example, when you talk about portfolio, you can ask them to draw their portfolio in the SABRE simulation. Now it's drawn there for them if you want to turn that on or turn that off, but just an exercise that they can do with each round. They still have to make their decisions, of course, but those exercises are there. How did they decide to do an R&D in this segment? Did they do their segmentation evaluation? So those are the types of things that profs will ask them, just a one-pager to hand in. And then at Wharton Business School, they've been using our simulation as a final exam. And what they found there is, you know, they have bigger teams of 6 or 7. And the professor there wanted to know, you know, is there one or two students that aren't totally involved in the simulation? So with the final exam, they play the last round as individuals, and they score a part of their mark on that final exam. So I think they have an hour-and-a-half decision that they make, and that's their exam. So that's all set up and ready for you to use as prompts.
Awesome, thanks, Cam. So we've got a lot of questions here that are sort of drilling down into some of the specific games, and each of the games may have a different set of courseware that come with it. But I will try and answer these questions as sort of efficiently as I can. So Matt Jordan, he asked, what are some of the financial spreadsheets and reports that are used in the simulation? So for example, in the strategy game, we have a demand forecasting worksheet, we have a production planning worksheet, and we've got a product P&L worksheet. But each game may come with different worksheets, may come with less, may come with more. The reports that you will see, again, that depends on which of the simulations that you're talking with. So I think some of these questions we're probably best left to specific calls, because they're dependent on which game we're talking about. Within this, so Charles asks here, within the strategy scenario, is there any ethical or sustainability scenarios in the simulation? Okay, that's a great question. So I think you're talking there about the strategy game, and are there any ethical or sustainability scenarios within it? So one of the things that that game has, or in fact that series of games have, is completely customizable news items and crises. And so absolutely in the strategy game, we have some news items that speak specifically to environmental and ethical issues. But also in that same portfolio of games, we have the strategic eco manager game, which is very much focused on the sustainability theme and environmental risk management in particular. I've got a question here from Luz about compatibility with Blackboard and Blackboard Learn. We certainly work with universities that deliver our sims while the game platform is embedded in some way into their learning management system, even if it's just placing the URL for the students to click onto so they can then access the game. For a more complete integration, we can do that too, depending on volume. Erica here asks a question about reinforcing team behaviors. I'm looking for a pretty simple simulation that is only 1 to 2 hours long, that would help a new team get to know each other, gauge work styles, strengths and weaknesses. I think, Erica, to full disclosure, I think our games naturally fit into sort of more extensive application. The shortest of our games is about 5 rounds. The longer games are typically, you know, anywhere between 6 to 8 to 12. We've got one of our games, Geo, that actually runs up to 100 rounds and over. Any of those games could be taken and used over a smaller number of rounds to do what you're looking to do. But that might not necessarily be their natural application. But Cam, if you've got something to say about that, that would be interesting to hear.
I was going to say the shortest one we have is a sales sim, Jeremy, and typically that goes over 2 rounds, which would take you over 2 classes. That'd be about the shortest one that we have. Okay,
that's great. That's great. So, so are there any other questions that you guys have? I don't want to keep everyone on the call to answer like questions that drill down really specifically into individual games, because some of those games might not be applicable to everyone else. If there aren't any more questions, I think all that's left to do is for me to thank you all for coming to this webinar. We really appreciate your interest and your time. So please, if you have any more questions that you'd like to direct to us, please write to us at info@hfxtraining.com or my email address that I think you should already have. And we would love to have a more specific conversation with you about your particular needs and teaching context. So thanks again for your time, And we wish you all the best for the rest of the AOM conference and for the upcoming semester. So thanks again, and have a great evening. Take care.